Now, do you need us to log people in, or have you got it all sorted there?
No, so people will start coming in now. We've got a few people already coming in. Hi everyone, we're just going to give it a few minutes to let everybody come in.
Yeah, you will, because I've got it on gallery view. Yeah. Did you want to? Because I can put it on speaker.
Person who speaks gets a big screen.
Little tech bubble.
Hi everyone, we're just going to give it a few more minutes just to let everybody come in. Got a few more people waiting to attend. We'll probably give it another few minutes as well.
It's not rocking too much, but do you mind being not much the table? No, it's all good. Like you haven't made it much at all. No, I don't want you to feel sorry about it. It's just like you know. All right.
For those who've just joined, we're just going to give it a few more minutes just to let everyone come in. It looks like some people are a little bit late, but that's fine. We'll just maybe wait till 5 minutes past and then we can get it started. Okay, so I might kick things off. So thanks everyone for joining us. I'll be filling in for my colleague Kelsey, who's unfortunately unwell today, so I hope she gets better soon. My name's Harriet. I'm the Digital and Communications Coordinator at Australian Organic. Thanks for joining us for the first of 2 of our Fermented Bevies Masterclasses with Dr. Sarah Lantz. For those of you who don't know Sarah, she's a fermentation expert, holistic nutritionist, lecturer at the University of Queensland, and she's got several publications all about natural health and well-being, and she's truly an expert of everything for all things ferment. So yeah, this would be an exciting class. I'd also like to welcome our Bud Club members. If you aren't already a member of the Bud Organic Club, you can sign up for free on our website, and you get exclusive access to a members portal full of recipes and articles, all to learn more about the organic industry. And that includes exclusive articles from Dr. Sarah Lantz as well in there. So yeah, if you're not a member already, sign up for free. Throughout the masterclass, if you have any questions, we're going to have a Q&A at the end if there's enough time. So just put your questions in the chat box at the bottom of your Zoom window, and we'll see if we can answer your questions at the end. But I will hand over to Dr. Sarah now.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Could you give me the thumbs up, Harriet?
Yep, all good.
Oh, good, awesome. Well, welcome. I don't know if I'm the expert, but I am constantly learning about fermentation, and I'm constantly learning about microbes and the relationship that we as humans have with this beautiful kingdom of microbes. And so I always think about microbes as being all around us. They're on our skin. There are more microbes on our hands than there are people on the entire planet. If you touch anything that's living, it has microbes. And so what we're going to do today is actually work with the microbes that are already on our produce. And as we go along, please feel free to write some stuff in the chat boxes if you've got questions as they come along. Fermentation has been around for a really long time. You know, as long as we can remember, through ancient histories and through all ancient cultures have had some form of fermentation. So today what we're going to be doing is well, in this masterclass, we're going to be doing 4 beverages, but today we're only going to be doing 3. So we're going to be looking at a ginger bug, which you could also alternatively add in turmeric or galangal instead of turmeric or instead of ginger, or you could use a combination of them. But mostly we are going to use a ginger bug. So it's traditionally known as a ginger bug. And it's a really simple recipe. And then we're going to move on to kombucha. And it's strange to do a Zoom call because I'm so used to doing fermentation classes where there's interaction. So this is the first time I'm doing this, and I feel like I'm just speaking to a screen. So excuse me.
Can they hear?
Yeah, they can hear. So, you know, that's what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to be doing ginger bug, and then we're going to do kombucha. And we're going to be looking not just at kombucha, but how do you flavor kombucha once you've actually done the kombucha. And then we're going to be doing a fermentation class in a couple of weeks. So while your ferments are fermenting, there might be some questions that come up. So in those next 2 weeks, please write them down or let me know or ACO know, so then we can actually bring that up at the next masterclass as well. So we're going to be doing kombucha and then how to flavor kombucha, some of the ins and outs of kombucha. There's a whole lot of stuff, that questions around sugar levels and alcohol levels. So I'm going to be addressing that today as well. And the last one we're going to be doing is fire cider tonic, which is just this great tonic. It's on the shelves these days, but it's been around for centuries, and it's something really easy to do at home. And I think all of these recipes are something that you can easily do, easily have them on the bench at home in your kitchen. The one thing I would say is, so often in this world, we often feel like, oh, I haven't got all of the equipment, or I haven't got all of the fancy airlock jars and so forth. So what I would say is that you can do all of these recipes. In fact, you can do most fermentations or most ferments with whatever's lying around the house. So when you've got jars, see if they're, if you might want to wash them up and sterilize them and use them for fermentation. So always just have a stack of jars around you. Things like often in fermentation we have weights. You don't necessarily even have to buy weights. You can actually use things like lemons and oranges and produce for weights, for example, and even crock systems. So if you're doing a sauerkraut or kimchi, I can show you how to do that as well with just everything around the house. So today, for example, I forgot to bring some mesh that goes on, or some cheesecloth to go over the ferment. So I've actually just cut up a a towel that I use around the house. Like you can use old t-shirt material. So, one of the things about fermentation is that please just use whatever's around the house, what you've got in your kitchen. The other thing I would say is produce. Try and get it as local as possible, as organic as possible. What we know about fermentation is that if you're not using organic produce, because it's got all the pesticides and weedicides and fungicides on them, I mean, when you think about it, anything with iocide means death. It means, it's pesticide, weedicide, fungicide, homicide, suicide. So pretty much the produce that you're getting if you're using conventional produce usually will not ferment, or it won't ferment to its potential. So if you're using organic produce, even some organic produce which has got a bit of soil on it, you're utilizing all of the microbes that's on the skin and in the actual produce itself. So particularly for things like ginger, which can be highly conventionally highly irradiated, and lots of pesticides and fungicides used on that. So, and same with things with also the tapash, which we're going to do in the next ferment class, which is the pineapple. So, if they're conventionally bought, often they will not ferment. And we have actually done experiments where we've done a ginger bug, which is conventional produce, and then organic produce. And we really see the massive difference. You just do not see the aliveness and the beneficial bacteria that's going to grow through your ferment if it's actually conventionally, something that's from Woolworths or Coles, for example. So I might get started. The one thing I would like to say is I'm actually in a gutsy fermentary in Brisbane. So if there is a few noises around and stuff, they're actually fermenting some really pungent smelling sauerkraut in the other room, so that we may get some orders coming in, or we may get a little bit of disturbance, but we hope not as well. So it's a pretty amazing place to be actually working here in Brisbane. So I'm going to start. So I'm going to start with a ginger bug. And so if you're doing it alongside of me, what you will need to get at this point is you'll need a jar. This is a 2-litre jar. You could get a 1-litre jar, you could get a 500 ml jar, you could get a 5-litre jar, whatever's around your house, you can actually use for that. And it really just depends on the ratios. And one of the things, even though we've given you all of the recipes, and you have all of those with you today, you can be, if you don't have enough sugar or you haven't got enough ginger, please don't despair. Like fermentation is a little bit of variance. So a little bit of utilizing your own intuition there. And the other thing I would say as well is that your home will be different than my home. I'm in a fermentary at the moment, so there is like a zillion and million and trillion one bacteria around me at the moment because there's so much fermentation going on. But your house will have very different microbes than my house at home, or your neighbor's house, or your family's houses. And you need to be able to learn to symbiotically work with those microbes. And they're the microbes that you need. They're the microbes that are in your lives and on your skin and on your produce. So, if we did today, use the same produce, the same, jars and so forth. If I did that at my house and you did it at your house, your ferment will probably taste differently than my ferment. And that is based on what's in our current environment, so we need to be really, kind of aware of that. And it's also the beauty of fermentation, I think, as well. Fermentation is something that isn't, like a McDonald's. You're not going to get exactly the same every single time. Which makes it really amazing. So something like a kombucha that's made in winter at the moment will taste slightly different than it's in summer, for example, based on the produce, based on the weather, based on the microbes that are in the environment. So that's, that's something to be aware of. So if you do a ginger bug today, it may taste different when we move into spring or summer. And generally speaking, the microbes are the specific microbes that you need in your body. And it's very seasonal. So for example, in winter at the moment, I don't know about you, but my body is really feeling like soups and stews and warming foods. It doesn't feel like a whole lot of salads these days. And so the microbes are similar in the sense that they will shift and change based on the weather and what's actually needed at that particular time, which is so perfect for fermentation. So I'm going to get started. So you need a 2-litre jar. I could just talk about this, you know, all day, fermentation. So you will need, so if you don't even have a grater, you can actually just chop it up. If you have a juicer, you might want to juice it. I'm just going to use a grater. So ginger, and this is just local ginger. I'm in Queensland, so it's very local up here. You will want to, there's different ways of actually doing this recipe. So you might want to do a couple of tablespoons. You might want to do a cup, depending on the size of your vessel. Yeah. So I'm going to start by just grating some ginger. And I'm going to grate all of it. So I've got the skin, I haven't peeled it, and the microbes are actually on the skin as well as inside the actual ginger. If you have turmeric around, you may actually want to include some turmeric. It's generally done with ginger. You could do it with galangal as well, but if you've got some turmeric, you might want to throw that in as well. So I'm going to actually just grate up some ginger. Unfortunately, I'm not great at measuring. So you've got the recipe in front of you, so you might want to do some specific measuring. But this is a really simple recipe. It's great for colds and flus. It's also great for things like flavoring for cordials. It's great for flavoring kombucha. It's great to use as a tonic. Yeah, full of nutrients. I'm going to get some of that. Okay, before I put that in the jar itself, sugar. So people often, you do need sugar. So pretty much the recipe calls for sugar and water and ginger. And you could add any other spices in there as well, or turmeric or galangal or even cinnamon, for example. But it's a pretty, you know, you could just do a ginger bug on its own and it will ferment over the course of days and weeks. People often ask about sugar. And I always have to remind people, because obviously we've got to keep sugar low in our diets. We're not used to having sugar in our bodies in the quantities that we're having today, and I would completely agree with them. I always remind people that the sugar is here for the microbes as a fuel source, not for your body. So often people will starve their scobies in their kombucha or their kefir or even the ginger because they go, oh, I will put less sugar than required. But I need to remind people that you're also doing your body an injustice when you do that. So the sugar will actually be taken up by the microbes. They use it, they consume it, they eat it essentially, and they transform it into a range of different microbes, bacteria, yeasts, and so forth, which are what we want because that's perfect for our bodies. In terms of sugar, the amount of sugar, so, and also what kind of sugar, you can use cane sugar, obviously organic. You could use any fermentable sugar. You could use coconut sugar, you could use rapadura. It's, yeah, when we're talking about the coconut sugars and the rapaduras and so forth, they're a little bit harder to take up. They take a little bit longer to ferment than just cane sugar, but still really fine to use. And today I'm actually using coconut sugar because that's what I actually had in the cupboard. So what you do need to use is some sugar, and you've got your recipes in front of you. Oh, probably put a little bit too much then. So things like sugars like stevia and xylitol won't work because they're non-fermentable. We also need, from this point, we also need some water. And we just need to get that dissolved. So this is actually going to be quite a dark because of the coconut sugar. So make sure that that's all dissolved. And then all we're going to be doing is actually adding our ginger. So ginger buds can be done in a whole range of different ways. One of the ways is that you could add, as I've given you in the recipe, a little bit of ginger, a little bit of sugar every single day. If I don't have a lot of time, I'll actually just do a lot of ginger and a lot of sugar and a lot of water, and I'll just leave it. And then usually in a week or two, as long as I stir it every day and give it some oxygen, and it will actually ferment really, really quickly. So I'm just going to use the rest of this ginger because I don't want to waste it. And this ginger smells absolutely amazing. Cool. So if I had a bit of time, and the recipe that I've given you calls for adding a couple of tablespoons of sugar, a couple of tablespoons of ginger every day for a period of time and stirring it. You can absolutely do that. If you want to actually just do it in one big hunk and make sure it's stirred every day, that's absolutely fine as well. And a bit more sugar water. And pretty much, okay, so from this point you can put a lid on it. It doesn't need a lot of oxygen. It doesn't really need to be an aerobic ferment. You could, instead of putting a lid on it, you could actually put a, some sort of a cloth on it with a band to have it breathe, for example. I'm just going to put a lid on mine just because it's easy. So the critical thing is that you actually every day, so if you put it on the bench, every day, give it a bit of a stir, give it a bit of a shake, and keep going. So at the moment, if you tasted it, it would taste like really sweet ginger. Over the course of days, up to about a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, over the first couple of days, you'll actually see some bubbles. So what we've essentially been doing as we aerate it and as we actually grate it, we're actually waking up the bacteria and the yeasts and all the microbes, and we're bringing them to life. And so if we just leave that, because we've given them some sugar, they will actually come alive and they'll create what's called a ginger bug. So what would taste very sweet now, eventually over the course of a couple of days, will actually become really kind of concentrated and really gingery and really quite tart. And if you leave it, if you left that there for 6 months, it would actually become like a ginger vinegar. And you could also use that as well, So find a sweet spot. So it might be like a week or it might be 10 days. And you might just drink that and go, that is absolutely perfect. So you could actually just keep drinking. I usually on the bench, I will actually usually take a cup out and drink it, and then I'll fill it back up again. And you could actually do that for a period of time. Or, after 10 days, for example, you might find a really beautiful sweet spot where you go, that ginger bug tastes absolutely perfect to my palate. And it really is individualized, and it really needs to be your taste and your palate. And if that's the case, you might want to strain it and then put it in the fridge, and it won't ferment anymore after you put it in the fridge. And it might be just perfect just the way it is there. But you will actually see bubbles over the first couple of days. You'll actually see it coming alive. And in that sort of case, make sure it's actually shaken, aerated every single day. So usually I just leave it on the bench, and every day I'll just walk by and I'll give it a bit of a shake. If it gets too sour for you, you can add some more sugar and some more ginger and just wait another couple of days to ferment a little bit more, and you actually find eventually this really beautiful sweet spot that's perfect for your taste buds. And that's a ginger bug, and that is just absolutely fantastic as a tonic. You could put it in teas with warm water. You could use it, as I said before, as a cordial. You could use it in, pretty much, any kind of ginger that's required for ginger. But it's just a really good elixir or just a really good tonic for you. So that's ginger bug, and I really look forward to finding out about how people do with their specific ginger bug. Yeah. Any other questions I've forgotten? Yeah. Good. Okay, cool. I've just got an assistant here who's just helping me to go. Okay, have I answered everything? That's good. But please, I'd love to find out how your ginger bug goes, because it's just such an easy ferment. And with your kids, you know, if you've got kids, you'll actually see it fermenting. So it's this really beautiful experience to do with kids. It's like ginger, water, and sugar. And you can really see the aliveness, you know, and kids usually, you know, I mean, my kids really enjoy this ginger bug as well. So it's just one of those, you know, beautiful tonics. My other daughter's here as well. So that is a beautiful ginger bug. So I'm going to give this to my beautiful, there you go. That's ginger bug. Perfect. Okay, so very simple recipe. You know, fermentation does not need to be difficult at all. And there are some ferments such as, tofu and tempeh, I must say, that I really struggle with because it is a much more difficult ferment. But things like beverages, if you're just starting out on this journey, are so easy, and you really get to have this beautiful, I guess, a dance with microbes. So there's this beautiful dance between you and the microbes and fermentation, the practice and the cooking of fermentation. So I'll leave that there for the ginger bug, because I can keep talking about ginger bugs.
Do you want to open up to any vocal questions?
No,
Or?
no,
Cool.
no, they're going to ask questions at the end.
Sweet.
So the next ferment I wanted to do, I usually ask at this point, who is fermenting kombucha? We bought kombucha out. I used to run a kombucha company, and we bought that out in 2010. You know, we were one of the first kombucha companies that came out. And at that point, there was some sort of fringe dwellers from the 70s and 80s, you know, 60s doing kombucha, but it was really a fringe kind of ferment. And these days it's everywhere. It's this beautiful ferment that's become this very mainstream kind of ferment. So I'm going to show you how to do it at home, which is super easy. But unlike a lot of ferments such as ginger bug that doesn't need a colony of, you know, bacteria and yeast to be brought in, kombucha is quite different because you do need to either purchase a SCOBY. A SCOBY is a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast, or might have a friend. People who are fermenters, in my experience, are really beautiful, generous people, and we love to share our knowledge. We love to share our SCOBYs and our cultures with people. So if you've got a friend who is, you know, already crafting kombucha, please ask them for a SCOBY, because I'll show you what a SCOBY actually looks like. So this SCOBY has been on our bench for months and months and months, and this is a 5-litre jar. You could do a 10-litre jar, you could do a 2-litre jar, and your SCOBY will grow as big as whatever the vessel actually, you know, is. So we've heard of people, and in fact, in the brewery I used to work for, we used to have 200, 300 litres of kombucha, and in really big stainless steel vats. Yeah, and the SCOBY, we could put a tiny SCOBY in there, and over a period of time, that SCOBY will grow. If it's given the right environment and it's given the right food, it will actually grow as big as that surface area. So I'm going to show you a SCOBY. This is my SCOBY. This is actually quite a thin SCOBY. This is our beautiful SCOBY. So SCOBYs are symbiotic colonies of bacteria and yeast. And the reason I say that you can actually get one from a friend is because every time you produce a batch of kombucha, it will actually grow another baby. Yeah, and so sometimes, this is a very thin SCOBY because I've only just started this SCOBY, but sometimes I've seen people with vessels and their SCOBYs, you know, are the whole way, you know, through the jar itself, you know, so you can actually slice them. Sometimes you can pull them apart. But yeah, as I said, every time you do a brew, a new SCOBY will actually be created, usually on top. Yeah. So I'm going to be working with this beautiful SCOBY today. So if you don't have a SCOBY, there are available SCOBYs on the internet. There are people who are willing to give them away. In most cities and a lot of different towns, there's beautiful fermentation clubs, which is really awesome. And so, as I said before, people are usually really happy to actually generously give them away. Having said that, I wrote a book, and one of the things I said in the book was, make sure that your SCOBY comes from a really beautiful environment. So your SCOBY will absorb, I mean, it's a living, breathing beautiful organisms. So it's going to be, if it comes from a smoking house, if people are smoking in the house, it will actually consume whatever is in the house. And I would probably say that in terms of emotional well-being as well. So make sure that your SCOBY comes from a really happy home, yeah? And I've met so many families who name their SCOBY. I've met kids who are friends and talk to their SCOBYs, and I do believe it's kind of like gardeners who are in their gardens, and they will absolutely say that if you're happy and you talk to your flowers and your produce, and a lot of the farmers I speak to, you will have beautiful produce, and there is that connection between the animals and the plants, and also things like the microbes and us. So bring love to these beautiful cultures that we're actually working with today. And I would say also, when you're working with them, make sure you're actually bringing yourself, because essentially you're wanting these babies to do good stuff for your body. And so there is that relationship between the two of you. I know that some people are like, whoa, that's really woo-woo, but I promise you, give that a go and see how you go. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to be working with this SCOBY here. She hasn't actually got a name. I haven't named her yet, but she will probably by the end of the class today. So what I'm going to do is kombucha is really, really simple. It is simply sugar and tea. So about the tea, so any kind of tea pretty much. So SCOBYs, in my experience, do really well. They grow really robust with black and green tea. Having said that though, if you are not keen on the caffeine, you can always have rooibos tea. You can even have some herbal teas as well, but at some point, you might be fermenting the SCOBY and it might start to not get as strong. In that case, just do a brew with a green tea, for example. So today I'm actually using some rooibos tea. Yeah, I'm going to use tea bags today. You could use tea. The only teas I wouldn't use are anything with oils in them. So some of the chai teas and some of the spices may not mix actually with the SCOBY itself. So you want it as easy as possible. Again, around the sugar, I'm going to be using, what sugar have I got? What sugar did you give me? I'm just going to be using a raw sugar today. But I could use coconut sugar. I could use Rapadura. I find just straight up, a good quality organic cane sugar really easily taken up by the SCOBY. Again, the sugar is for your kombucha, not for your body. So it might start off tasting like a, sweet cup of tea, if that makes sense. And then over the course of a week, depending on where you are, really the weather, the warmer the weather, the quicker the fermentation. So so it might take a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, depending on where you actually are. So I'm today using a combination of rooibos tea and just some general cane sugar. So one of the first things you have to do is actually create a brew with that. Thank you. So could you, that'll be fine. So I'm just going to brew a really strong cup of tea, and that's about, I think, 1.5 liters, I think. So I'm going to do a really, really strong one. So I'm going to use 6 tea bags of rooibos. If you've got 2 tea bags, use 2 tea bags and just steep it for as long as possible. The goal, people often say, how much do I use? And we usually do give an estimate on your recipe. If you're a little bit over, a little bit under, that's absolutely fine. The real importance is actually the steep and getting as much of the flavor out as possible. Yeah, so I'm going to use that. We've actually said probably about 4 liters. It was around about 270 grams of sugar. For 5 liters, it's around about 350 grams. You could do a little bit less, a little bit more. But as I said before, when I've worked with people who are really about low sugar in their diet, and I'm absolutely for that as well, they often feel like if they cut back on the sugar for their SCOBYs, they're doing a good thing. And I would actually say you're kind of really kind of starving your SCOBY. So do the full amount of sugar. And if it still feels sweet or slightly sweet or not to your liking after 10 days, wait another day, and then see if that fits on your palate, So I'm going to use about 350 grams of sugar. And my assistant here is going to do some hot water and create
So
a little bit more, a bit more. Perfect, thank you.
this can be your stirrer and your taster.
Beautiful. So we're going to be dissolving that sugar.
Do you want to describe the hot water in glass?
Yeah, so just be careful. I'm doing it in a glass jar. You know, this is a really hardy glass jar. You could do it in a bowl. You could just do a stainless steel bowl. You could do, just be careful with putting, obviously, this is like kind of, cooking 101. Just be careful with hot water and glass, but I've got a very robust glass here. So we want to get, so what I would normally do at home is I would brew this up and I would just probably leave it for 20 minutes, half an hour. Just let it get cool down, get as much steep in as possible, get as much tea in as possible. But other people have different methods as well, yeah? So I'm just going to put that aside for a moment.
Do you want to cool it down with water?
Yeah, I'll just wait for a minute and then I'll put some cold water in it. Cool. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get another glass jar. I'm probably going to put some water in there.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm going to put some cold water in because when I add, yeah, I'm going to have to fill that up. So yes. When I'm going to, I'm going to probably pull it up to about here, right to the top, because I really want a 5-litre brew. If I'm going to do kombucha, I want a lot of it. But I also don't want to do a really hot tea. So when we put our SCOBY and our kombucha in our new brew, we really don't want it hot at all because we want those microbes to be thriving. So normally, as I said, at home, I would normally be just setting that aside for a good 20 minutes, half an hour, even longer, just to actually bring the temperature down. But I'm going to be, kind of speeding it up a little bit now. So then I'm going to be tipping in the tea and sugar solution.
I pour this in so it doesn't crack. Same way.
Just when. You want to get as much tea as possible. Taste it to see how warm it is. So really, that's just a really sweet cup of tea at this point. So at this point, we really want to be putting in our SCOBY, and so I'm going to be transferring our SCOBY. As I said before, some SCOBYs can be really little, some of these are really round. This one's kind of only been using it really recently, so it's actually quite thin. Sometimes they're really robust and thick. And your SCOBY will be perfect for what it actually looks like. So I'm going to be moving across. I've actually got my original SCOBY. So this was my original SCOBY. She's kind of fatter. She's fatter and littler. And she actually then, so I'm gonna, I feel like she can go for another round. So I'm gonna put her in. And then I'm gonna be actually putting the mother. So this is a much bigger SCOBY, but thin. So I'm actually gonna be moving this across. Now, SCOBYs can have things like yeast strands on them, which is what I just pulled out there. They're absolutely fine. So I'm gonna put that across. Can move it back now.
All right.
So she's all beautiful in there. I might need to get a little bit of more cold water.
Yep.
And thank you. So she's gonna do what she wants to do. This is her home. So often I actually get questions. People contact me and say, my SCOBY has turned to the side, my SCOBY has turned around, my SCOBY's just, dropped to the bottom. And I always say to people, it's her home. She can do whatever she wants to do, and she will. It's kind of like trusting nature. So that's what's going to happen. She's going to do whatever she wants to do. The main thing is that if you know it's going really well, you will actually get a new SCOBY being created on top. And sometimes people call me up and say, I can't see the new SCOBY. And I'm like, it's 3 days. So sometimes you have to wait 5, 6, 7, you know, depending on the weather. If you're in a really cold environment right now, you might be in Tasmania, or some of you might be overseas and there's snow. It actually may take a little bit longer for a new SCOBY to be growing. So the warmer the environment. So if I'm doing a kombucha this size in summer, it might take a week. If I'm here, even here in Brisbane, if I'm in Brisbane, it might actually take between 2 and 3 weeks, depending on the weather and what's going on. So ferments like warm conditions, and the warmer, it seems to me that the ferment actually goes faster. So one of the last step I need to do, in which people often forget, is it's got tea and sugar and we've got a SCOBY on it. But the last thing we actually need to do, we need to make sure that it's got an acidity level. So it likes its original environment. So whatever size vessel you actually have, keep 20% of that original kombucha aside. So I'm going to be adding in about 20% of the vessel of the kombucha. And it just gives her kind of an environment that she already knows. So at the moment, she's kind of on the side. One of them's floating to the top. She's going to do what she needs to do. Kombuchas are an aerobic ferment. And so they need to, what that means is that they need to breathe. So she needs oxygen. So what we're going to do now is get a rubber band. Oh, that's a good rubber band. And I'm going to put a cloth on her. It can be any cloth. It could be a tea towel. I'm using a tea towel today because I forgot my cheesecloth. It could be cheesecloth. Sometimes with cheesecloth, depending on the environment, you may get fruit flies. So making sure that it's breathable material. Cotton's good. Muslin can be good. Tea towels can be good. But essentially putting that across. So at the moment, if you tasted that, you would still taste a sweet cup of tea with a slight acidity to it. So by the end, over the course of days, up to about a week, it'll actually turn from a sweet cup of tea to that kombucha taste. So it should actually have a little bit of acidity on it, but it also should be palatable. If you leave it, you know, sometimes people will say, oh, I left my kombucha and it's now really super sour. And in that case, it's turned into a kombucha vinegar. And kombucha vinegar is fantastic because you can still use it on salad dressings, and you know you can use it with anything that requires vinegar, essentially. So kombucha vinegar, but it's not a kombucha; it's a kombucha vinegar. And if that's the case, make sure that once you get to about a week, probably about a week, 11 days, 12 days. Keep tasting her every day, and until it gets to a palate that you find really enjoyable for you. And it won't be sweet, but it also won't be too sour either. And when that's the case, you'll be able to say, oh, I'm taking it off and I'm actually going to be decantering it. So I'll actually take, once it's ready to go, I'll actually take all of it down to about there again, right down. So we're leaving 20%, and I'll actually do a new one. Yeah, and I will use the rest of that kombucha. I will drink it, I will ferment with it, and I'm going to show you what to do if you want a flavored kombucha. Yeah. So once I've decanted it, once it's ready to go and I've decanted it and I've put it in some other bottles, then I really want to flavor my kombucha. In fact, you don't have to flavor your kombucha. You could actually just drink your kombucha as is. And I know a lot of people who just drink kombucha medicinally. So they will actually just take a cup off, drink it, and they'll just tip it back up with tea and sugar. And that's just like a rotational kombucha. And it's just delicious and medicinal, and they like it just like that. These days, we've gotten really fancy with kombucha. And you can actually flavor kombucha with pretty much anything. Anything out there, anything that you can imagine. So I'm going to show you, and we can do this in the next fermentation class as well. But there are a whole lot of different kombuchas that we can actually be flavoring. So I've actually come up with a couple, just whatever was around the brewery here today. I just went around and went, what's around so I can actually ferment them. So I've got these cute little bottles, and I'm going to show you how to. So what I literally do, you can juice. You know, if you've got a juicer and you're juicing regularly, you might want to produce, you know, a ginger and apple juice, and you could actually add that to your kombucha. So I didn't have a juicer when I got in here today, so I actually just looked around. So today what I've got in this bottle is I've got 2 vanilla beans with actually some raisins. So I've actually given it a little bit more. So if I just drank the kombucha now, it's got a bit of a tartness to it. So I actually want to flavor up my kombucha. So I want to give it a little bit more sugar as a fuel source to actually, you know, reinvigorate the ferment. So what I'll actually do is just do something like that, add in a few ingredients, and fill up the bottle of kombucha, yeah? And if I put a lid on that, you could drink it as is, you know, in another day or two. But you also could, if you want to do a second ferment, you leave that on the bench for another couple of days and you'll find that it's going to get fizzy again. When it's got, you know, if you listen to it, it'll be like a little bit of a ch, you know, then you don't want it too fizzy because it will actually become a bit explosive. So once it gets a little bit of fizz, you can actually just put that in the refrigerator. At this point for fermenters, the refrigerator is actually your friend, and it's your friend because it actually really slows down any kind of fermentation. Fermentation does and can still occur in the refrigerator, but it slows it down enormously. So that one was a vanilla bean and raisin, and it's got kind of like a creaming soda kind of taste, but if I had a date, a vanilla and date is fantastic as well. This one's just got oranges, obviously citrus are fantastic. This is just an orange. I've chunked up some orange and got some slices of that, and also some lemon as well. And we'll see how that goes. This one has got some turmeric and some ginger and some orange. And we'll see what that tastes like. So you don't have to do these little bottles, you can do any size bottles you actually want. As I said before, keep them on the fridge, or keep them out on your bench for at least 3, 4, 5 days, just see how they go in terms of bubbles, and then put them in your fridge. The last one that I really wanted to do was I've got these really cool Japanese fermented plums, and I actually am going to put some of them in the bottom, and then I'm going to see what that tastes like as well. But you could use, as I said before, juices, you could use powders, you could use chopped fruit. They're just some of our favorite ones, but just look around your house. Blueberries are fantastic, berries are fantastic. You can also use herbs. So herbs are fantastic as well. You could use a rosemary, you could use whatever. Mint is fantastic to put in there, and they just really look quite beautiful as well. Just looking at the time.
It's 12:45.
All right. Cool. So that's some of our kombucha. So leave these on the bench, wait till they get fizzy. You can drink them at that point. You can put them in the fridge and get them cold, and beautiful, different. And just, you know, play around and see how you go. And I'd absolutely love your feedback on that as well. So they're really cool little bottles. Okay, so I've got one more ferment to do. I can just, you know, you could actually just do a whole hour on kombucha. So I'm going to leave that with you. And then see how you go with your kombucha, and if you've got any questions at all, we can actually have a dialogue, and all of these questions will be brought to the second one as well. We can see if we've got 5 minutes at the end to actually take any questions as well. The last ferment that I'm going to do is, and it can be really easy as well, and this is like a ripper of a tonic. So what I need is, I could just use this one. This is just a bit of kombucha vinegar, so I'm going to use this as well. So what we actually need to use for fire cider. So fire cider is a tonic, and it's an elixir, and it's predominantly been done for centuries as a herbal, medicinal, fiery, getting rid of flus and colds and the lurgy. Just a really amazing tonic, and you'll actually, with your recipe, and so easy to do, and I would encourage everyone to have one of these beautiful medicinal ferments just sitting on the bench all the time. So I'm going to get a knife, and you could use, I've given you a recipe, but please feel free to bring your flavor to the recipe. So in this recipe, it's all the beautiful herbals. So I'm going to pour turmeric. You can chop it up, you can grate it. You could, yeah, just, you know, bring your own kind of flavor to it. I've got a lemon, of course. So this is, you know, all of these beautiful medicinal, and at the moment, so good with all of this citrus as well. So bringing in vitamin C's, obviously the turmeric has the active curcumin in it. If you don't like it too spicy, I'm just going to put them straight in my jar. But you can actually bring, if you don't like it too spicy, just don't add in so much of the hot stuff. I've got a range of different chilies, some jalapenos, and some just from my garden that I've been actually drying. So I'm actually just gonna, these are just some really hot red ones. So I'm just gonna really quickly dice some of them. I leave everything on. I leave the skin on. I leave the tops on. But you could use whatever is in your garden. You could use as much or as little chili as you want. Some people, if you don't have like fresh chili, like if you live in a place where there's not a whole lot of chilies around at this time, use the powders. You know, if you don't have fresh turmeric, use some powders. That's absolutely fine as well. So I'm going to add that in there. Garlic is fantastic, obviously, for warding off colds and flus. So I'm going to be using some of that. Ginger. You could use, the other thing that I've been playing around with through my apothecary is using adaptogenic herbs. So I like a bit of ginger. So you could be using, if you're a herbalist, if you like herbs, you know herbs, you could be using rosemary, oregano. You could be using, in terms of adaptogenics, you could be using astragalus or ashwagandha or gordicola, you know, and they could be used fresh, or actually you could use them dry as well. So they're beautiful. You could be using black peppers. I might get a little bit of garlic in there as well. Am I missing anything in there?
No.
I think I need to put. The only thing I'll kind of break down a little bit is the garlic, because I want as much in there as possible. So we'll often crush it. Like, I'm not too precious about it, but really what you're doing here is an infusion. So if I've got one at home, it's about 5 litres, and then I can take a cup out, use it as a tonic, use it at the end of a stir fry, for example, to get the medicinal benefits. So I might just put a little bit of onion as well. Whatever's really in season. If you can get it, it's really hard to get in Australia, particularly organically, and I feel like it's a whole business that someone could do, coming from a business background, is horseradish. Horseradish, you know, I get it in the States quite easily, but horseradish isn't huge here in Australia, and yet it is this beautiful, powerful, pungent beautifulness that I think everyone should kind of get. If you can get fresh horseradish, it's a real treat to actually get that. Yeah, as I said before, fresh peppercorns are really good. Do you think that looks pretty good?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see that.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah. So in terms of vinegar, so I've actually just used a kombucha vinegar, but that's just the base of it. But you could use any vinegars, really. I would use, you could use a white vinegar if you wanted to. I think the best vinegars are kombucha vinegar or an apple cider vinegar. And both are pretty readily available. If you're making your own kombucha and you've got lots of leftover kombucha vinegar, or you've just let go of your kombucha and you've just left it for 6 months, you could totally use that in a fire cider, and I would absolutely recommend that, because it's such a shame to actually let go of anything that you've actually been fermenting. Or you could actually make your own apple cider vinegar. Or if it's all too much and you're a busy single mama or dad, you can actually just go out and buy a really good certified organic apple cider vinegar as well. So I'm going to add that in. Oh my God, that looks just totally beautiful. Look at that.
So good.
It's so beautiful. So that is a fire cider. And in terms of the time for that, it's like, look at how beautiful that is. It's just, it makes me so happy just to look at that. So this is a 2 litre. If you're at home, I would recommend doing bigger amounts. You could, as I said before, grate it and just get really clever with it. I've been kind of experimenting with fire ciders that have different kind of spices, such as cinnamons and cloves and you know, just some different flavors to them, and you can get really creative with that. For some people, that you could put elderberries in there. When it's ready to go and you've tasted it and it feels really hot and beautiful, you could add some honey in that as well. Sometimes my kids won't have it directly like this, and so if I put a little bit of this, a little bit of fire cider and some lemon juice and some ginger and a little bit of honey, fantastic for warding off colds and flus and so forth. How long does it taste? Well, sometimes I will leave it until all of this infuses and kind of gets a little bit brown, and you can just see that it's actually been infusing in there for, you know, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You could leave it for 6 months. You know, you could actually have 2 on the go, and just, you could start 2 and then you could consume 1 and just leave 1 down. You know, all of that's really super easy. I would, for the first couple of days, move it, particularly even after the first week. Just make sure it just actually keeps moving and infusing. But you'll see that it's all vibrant and beautiful. If you leave it for months and months, obviously it will actually start to decay and all the flavors will be rich in it. At the moment, if you sipped it, you might get a hint of all of these sort of flavors, but the longer you leave it, the more potent it will become, and yeah, just rich and beautiful. So I'm going to leave that there. So that is a beautiful fire cider, and get really creative with that. I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to look at...
There's the first question,
there's a question.
From Jody.
From Jody, there's a question. With the ginger bug, once it's ready and you're using it, how do you keep it going so it doesn't, what's that word say? Sour.
Doesn't sour.
Do you just keep feeding it occasionally? Yes. So with a ginger bug, to keep it from not souring, once it's ready to go and you've used half of it, for example, you could just keep feeding it longer and longer for as long as you want it to. At some point, you will see that the ginger gets a little bit brown, and it kind of feels like it's been used. All of its life force has gone into the ginger bug, and you will just consume it. So in that case, you'd decant it, and then you'd actually start a fresh ginger bug. But you can actually keep a ginger bug going for quite a few months. Yeah. So just feel into it yourself. You will know. So fermentation is very intuitive. So you will start to begin to trust how you do ferments. So even some of the ingredients I've said, some of these might work for you. And then sometimes I've met people who go, I love it when it's got extra ginger or it's got extra turmeric. So really kind of find your way in it. But certainly you can actually do that in terms of keeping it continuous, or you can actually just start again. And ginger bug is something that happens really, really quickly and can become alive very, very quickly. So I hope I answered your question there.
So Rihanna's just saying that she had to take off,
okay.
But she was.
Bye, Rihanna.
Thank you.
Awesome. No worries.
And then Kelsey.
Kelsey says, how long does a kombucha last for? A kombucha, your SCOBY, wherever my SCOBY is, she's over here. Your SCOBY it could last you a lifetime. If you look after her, if you get a really beautiful, robust SCOBY, your SCOBY can just keep growing and keep growing and keep growing and producing babies for months, years. You can pass it on to your children and you'll be passing on the baby. So I would say when you're actually wanting to give away, the freshest SCOBY will be the new baby SCOBY. So it'll actually form on top, and it'll be the whitest part of the SCOBY. So in that context, you would probably give that away to a friend because it's the freshest, and then the next one will grow for you. Yeah. So it's kind of like you get layers. So you actually get the fresh baby, and then you get like the mother, and then you get the grandmother and the great grandmother and so forth. At some point with a kombucha, when the scobies get really, really, for a long period of time, you may want to separate those scobies and compost her or bring her back to the earth and keep the fresh ones alive. After a period of time, also your kombucha can get quite yeasty, and by yeasty I mean cloudy. It can get quite cloudy. When it gets to that point, you want to kind of get rid of, because all of that yeast is kind of like spent yeast cells. You don't need it in your body, but you can go for months and months just brewing your kombucha. And then when you notice it getting a little bit cloudy, you'd actually probably just keep all the top bit, probably 3/4, and you'd actually just get rid of the yeasty bottom bit. But if you keep your kombucha alive and healthy and feeding it can go for generations. I'm going to argue. I don't actually know, but I would. I've had scobies last for years and years and years and years.
Maybe speak to the actually once it's done, how long it lasts.
Oh, how long does a kombucha? Okay, the other thing is, how long does a kombucha last for? In our brewery, we used to have kombucha that, something like this that's in our cold room, and we used to go, oh my God, that's like 20 months old. Let's give it a go. So a kombucha will never actually go off. It'll actually just become more like kombucha vinegar and kind of less alive. But theoretically, in your fridge, there's usually something in the back of the fridge. We usually give it a go. We've got pretty good, guts. So, there's nothing. So in terms of that, it leads me on to a really quick question around how do you know if your SCOBY or your kombucha is not good. So there's two things that can happen. One is mold. Mold is just not good, and that's different than the carn yeast. Sometimes in ferments, you can get kind of like a white yeast. That's quite a different story than if your kombucha grows mold. Our general philosophy is just start again, send her love and compost her and actually start again. It's very uncommon, and usually you only get a mold on there when it's not acidic enough. So you remember when I put my kombucha down and if I didn't actually add in the acidic level, like the extra kombucha to bring up the acidity, it's too alkaline. And so the SCOBY's trying to ferment, but there's no acidity in there. And so usually, or you can actually possibly, and it depends on your environment, have mold, but it's very rare, but it can actually happen. And the other thing to look out for with kombucha is any kind of bugs. Ants love kombucha, and just generally fermenting. Flies, fruit flies, your house will attract any of those things. So just be mindful of that, because that can actually happen with fermentation as well.
That's beautiful, because it answers the final question, if it gone bad.
Yeah. Well, it is. Yeah, I answered that one. How can you tell when your ferment's gone bad? Look for anything that is, mold is probably the biggest one in any kind of creepy crawlies. And, my thing would be, trust your intuition. It's like, if it doesn't taste good for you, it's probably not going to be good for you. It's that thing. We need to trust ourselves. And trust our bodies. And I always say that slogan, trust your gut, and that really goes for that intuition. And I think fermentation has this beautiful ability to be able to bring us back to what feels good for our particular body. So I go for months at a time where I can't get enough sauerkraut, for example. My body needs it, I want it, and then there comes a day where I try and eat it, and literally my body goes, no, you've got enough of those microbes. And it's the same thing with everything, whether it's kombucha or sauerkraut or kimchi, or at some point your body actually says, I've actually had enough of those ferments. So this process is all about trusting your intuition and be guided by it. But, hopefully this workshop would have given you, some confidence to go, I'm just going to give it a go. I'm going to get in there and give it a go, because this is stuff that we innately know. This is stuff that's been passed down from generations to generations until it got to us, where food manufacturers took away this knowledge. And so this gives us an opportunity to step back into that role as producer, and not just consumer, but actually producer as well. So I think I'm on time. Just 3 minutes over.
That's all right.
So I might leave it there. If you've got, I don't know if ACO is going to take over, if Harriet's there to take over. I'll leave that for a second. Harriet, are you there?
Hello, yes.
But if there are, so do you want to take over about any questions that arise? Because we are going to meet up again in 2 weeks' time.
Yes, so if you do have any questions, we've included Sarah's email in the, I think in the follow-up email that will come after this webinar's finished. So if you want to email her your questions, and then we'll answer them in the next session on the 30th of June. So it gives you enough time to try out your ferments, and then if you have any questions, we can come back and answer them and see how your ferments are doing, I guess.
Beautiful, that's good. And we're also going to be doing a to pash. So we're going to be doing some questions and answers. And so definitely get some spices and a pineapple for the next session, because I'm going to do a really beautiful pineapple to pash, which is super easy, and pineapples are in abundance right now. So bring that as well to the next class. So yeah, it's been beautiful to be here. I haven't really been able to see anyone, but yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.